Hello, everyone. I'm super excited to have a really amazing guest today. We have Garrett Smiley from Sora. He's the CEO and co-founder. And in a previous life, I had helped launch an online school. So I think we kind of competed a little bit. We won't be talking about them too much here, but I was always fascinated with what Sora is doing. They're very innovative. It's an education startup based in Atlanta originally, but obviously you're online, so you're remote. And Sora is a virtual project-based high school where students explore their interests, learn however is best for them, and gain exposure to future careers and fields of work, and hopefully just learning how to learn, right? And figure out their passions. Prior to Sora, Garrett co-founded a charity which built wells in developing nations called Drops of Love. Garrett, I think you did this in high school. You're amazing.
I did. This was the high school project.
That is amazing. And then you also directed a university startup incubator called Core Founders at Georgia Tech. And you started an education nonprofit that works with foster children to develop financial literacy called Flip. Garrett, you have a degree, or you studied computer science at Georgia Tech, right? And
that is correct.
You're the tech guy.
Half of those statements for sure.
Okay, good. All right. So, and you also worked in a venture partner, Contrary Capital. So you scouted, invested in, and mentored startups in the Atlanta area. Wow, you have such an amazing background, Garrett. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing today?
Thank you. I'm great. I'm glad to be here. These are the fun conversations.
Yeah, totally. I mean, you're talking about like the future of education, right? And discussing education. And I love talking about that too. I think I mentioned to you that I created a list of over 70 online schools for the participants of my 12-week course. It's not available for free yet because I've put a lot of time into it. And right now I'm training one of my 14-year-old twins to be a VA for me. And she is clicking on all the links and, putting in the tuition, the age range it's for, and whether, all the information that parents need to know or families need to know to make a decision. So anyway, Sora for me, who's been in the field for a bit, is one of the more interesting, innovative ones, online schools. So I'm really excited to share with my Facebook group, and then later we'll post this on YouTube. So, but first I have a bunch of questions for you, but since our audience is made up mostly of world schoolers or those hoping to world school, I want to ask you some world school related concerns and questions, because
awesome.
Get that out of the way, because if you answer the questions and people go, this is not for us, they don't have to watch the rest of the video. We hope they'll watch the rest of the video. But we have some unique challenges and requirements versus a stationary family, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so my first question is, what time zones does Sora work in?
US-based time zones. However, we do have people pushing each of the edges, but it works far better if you have significant overlap with US-based time zones.
Okay, but what does that mean?
Any US-based time zone. So West Coast, East Coast, as long as you have, let's say, 4 to 5 hours of overlap during the workday, Sora can work for you.
Okay, but is it 9 a.m. Eastern? Because that's 6 a.m. Pacific, and teenagers don't like to wake up that early.
We have Pacific start times as well. So we have class sessions that are starting from the morning of East Coast time all the way to close of Pacific time.
Cool. Okay, so those of us who have traveled to Latin America, there's great time zones there that would work. I mean, actually, it's more Eastern, like for the Midwest to Eastern, depending on if you're in Mexico or even Argentina, where we spent time. It's like further east, which is awesome.
Yeah, we have students all around the Western Hemisphere. So no matter where you go, as long as you go north to south, Sora works for you.
Okay, cool. In the future, are you hoping to expand this?
Absolutely. And we expand into different countries and different time zones as we get new students. So we weren't always all the US time zones. We are now. Okay. And if you all are intrigued by Sora's premise, but you're bouncing around US, Asia, wherever it is, let us know. And that might motivate us to open up in your time zone.
Okay, cool. Because, I have friends who have worked in Asia or Europe, and they're working in the middle of the night. It's the same thing with school. The kids would have to wake up at 2 a.m. to do the class. All right. So how many hours a day does a typical Sora student spend attending Sora sessions and also doing their learning work?
Yeah, I liken it to like a small liberal arts college, that type of schedule. It's much more like a college schedule than a traditional middle or high school schedule, where the students have, let's call it 3 hours a day of synchronous time. And when it's the synchronous time, it's small groups, it's high impact, it's Socratic discussions, debates, breakout rooms, peer-to-peer, it's all that stuff. And then
not Zoom school, not pandemic school.
Exactly. Not you sit there like this, all grumpy for 8 hours staring at your class, but really scrolling Facebook, right? It's nothing like that. And then in the in-between moments, students are doing either their pre-work for an upcoming session, or which is reading or their practice or whatever, or they're doing independent project work or going to a club or any of the other things that they can do.
So it could be what, 4, 5, 6 hours a day?
It really depends on the student. I think the synchronous time is probably 3 hours, and 5 to 6 hours is a good average. But some students, they are crushing it and their schedule works in such a way that they want to put in, 8, 9 hours. And then some kids can get by with, 4 to 5.
Okay. And you guys are Monday through Friday?
Yep. Okay. And Wednesday is more of an asynchronous day. I don't know if that's super relevant to you all.
Yeah, it is. The reason why I'm asking is, this will limit, because, when we're out in the world, we like to see it, right? We like to go out and about. We're not constant tourists, but some families prefer to fast travel. And when they do that, they're busy going out there and seeing the sites, or, getting involved with some eco lodge and doing volunteer work or farming, like the Worldschoolers do really interesting things. And so I think the slower travelers, people who spend maybe a month or a few months in one location, obviously right now in the Americas, it could work for them. And obviously Worldschoolers who transition to be an expat, this would be perfect for them. Okay, so how flexible is Sora with scheduling? Do you record the sessions if the kids miss it because they have a plane to catch or have something really cool to do?
We can one-off. We don't generally recommend that. However, to your previous question, how flexible we are with scheduling, we can be very flexible on 6-week increments. So what we call our semesters, they're like mini semesters, we call them cycles, and they last 6 weeks long. And every cycle, the students get to choose a completely different schedule. So let's say you are planning on doing this eco lodge volunteering thing that you just alluded to from 2 to 4, Tuesday, Thursday, or if you have a set block, or maybe you just don't want to do anything on Tuesday, Thursday, totally fine. We put that in our registration system. We work with the students to both choose their classes, because we have over 400 interest-based interdisciplinary classes, or learning experiences, I should say. Some of them are more async, starting every 6 weeks. So really the universe of both time, availabilities and interests are there for families to craft around their lives.
Okay, yeah. So I was going to ask you later, but I'll ask you now, your calendar, the school calendar. So you're off on the summers, and then you have these 6-week cycles starting when and ending when, and then sometimes there's breaks in between, because I looked at your calendar.
Oh goodness,
your website.
A pop quiz. I can pull up the exact answer.
No, you don't have to tell me exactly, but I think it's you start in late August or mid-August, and then
mid-August, August 16th this year.
Mid-June. So that doesn't allow a super long summer holiday, but I think you do have generous weeks off between cycles, and obviously Christmas and Thanksgiving.
That's right. Yep, that's right.
Okay, so families knowing that, they could try to be stationary when it's a school time basically, and then do the fast traveling in those many breaks between cycles, right?
We have multiple week breaks, like you're saying, in between, but also it is remote. So if you want to stay in the Western Hemisphere or in the Americas, we have families who are bounced around all the time. We have families who are learning and living from RVs and from, so it really doesn't matter. We have enough asynchronous time to make that work. But yes, if you want to travel to, Hawaii, Asia, Eastern Europe, it's probably better to do that in those dedicated breaks.
Yeah, that sounds good. So I reached out to you before, but yesterday I had, regarding this panel discussion, I had 4 parents whose kids attend an online school. So it was Socratic Experience, Laurel Springs, UK Virtual Academy, and then Montana Hybrid Academy. And I'll do these in the future too. So maybe I can have somebody whose kids go to Sora be on a future panel. But most of them were mostly synchronous. And then I think Laurel Springs, they chose the asynchronous just because they were traveling so much and they wanted to be able to do school on their time. Okay, so now that we know that, let's kind of go into how the school works. So you initially launched with a high school, but now you have middle school too, which is nice. So what ages are?
Yeah, so middle and high school, so 6th grade all the way through 12th grade.
The age, because sometimes we have people in other countries.
Oh, yes. Worldschoolers. I forgot the context for a second.
Yes, international audience.
So let's say roughly 11 to 18, but as it goes, it's not always a strict age thing. It's more about what content you've covered and the maturity level that they're ready for the our entry point.
Oh, cool. So somebody could, keep going until they're 19 or so because they're not ready to launch yet. I don't know.
Yeah? We have had that. We ideally want them to stay on the cadence that, because everyone comes in with an expected graduation year, they say. Sometimes, it doesn't work out that way. We need to stay a little longer, but also the more common use case is on the entry point, let's say a 9 or 10-year-old, right? And we have had some successful cases of students, quote unquote, skipping grades like that.
Yeah, awesome. So can students from any nationality attend?
Yep.
Okay, so awesome. Not just US. I mean, I know you are accredited in the US, but
we are a US based school, which so we're beholden to all the US based accreditation standards, which I can get into that if you want. But really what that means is you graduate with the United States private school diploma, even if our students in Bermuda, Mexico, Brazil, those places.
Wonderful. Okay, super. So those families who can work with the above parameters, let's keep learning about Sora. So let's talk about when Sora launched. And I know you did launch pre-pandemic, which is awesome. So can you tell us about when you launched and why you launched?
Yeah, we launched in 2019 before COVID was a thing. Really, the idea or the organization started in 2018, but we properly started with students and such in 2019. And the premise, very simple, high-level version of the premise is there are many different game plans education, as we all know, right? It's not just the traditional model, you do everything at the same pace and it's all about content mastery. And it's, that is not the only way to do things. It just feels normal because history, right? But it was an invention just like anything else. And our argument is that the world is different enough that perhaps there's a better way now. That is the kind way of saying there's definitely a better way of doing it now. And there are schools out there that never really followed that traditional game plan. They've been doing things differently, in many cases for a very long time, with really great results. So the premise of Sora is let's bring those best practices, to use corporate speak, let's bring the best things from those transformative, non-traditional schools, private schools, often $60,000, $70,000 in some cases, and let's bring that into a remote format for people who either don't live in close proximity to those things, or they don't want to pay the $60,000, $70,000. Instead, we are $12,500 a year with financial aid. So it's really about offering this type of education to a completely different audience, and in this global format where students and faculty from all across the world are in the same learning experiences interacting. So that's the very, very high level premise. I'm happy to dive into any of that.
Yeah, and I encourage everyone. I encourage everyone to just Google Garrett, Smiley, Sora, and you have other interviews that talk about your childhood, moving around and changing schools and being frustrated with some of the school systems and being confused about it. And obviously you did well enough to do well, go to Georgia Tech and all of that. But it came from your personal life about being frustrated with the more conventional school system. So yeah, that's awesome. So Sora is synchronous.
Can I say one piece on that? Because I think your audience will enjoy it. I think I was never a world schooler. I bounced mostly around the US, but wildly different cultures in the US. And then my parents loved traveling. So every break we were somewhere around the world. And I think what that gives you is perspective, right? So not only perspective in different cultures, but different ways of life in the US, different value systems, different, right? And so I felt like, yes, education is one of those things that kind of smacked me in the face and became an active problem in my life, because how could it not, experiencing so many different types of schools and education setups. But that exercise of traveling around, getting to know other people, getting to know other cultures, it is likely the most transformative education, quote unquote, that my parents gave me. So I just wanted to call that out to you all. Yes, there are downsides, but what you're doing for your kids is amazing.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. I mean, again, those of us who have launched into this lifestyle, we're seeing the benefits. I mean, it's not perfect. I have a pro and con list on Facebook. If anyone wants to ask to look at it, it's a giant list, and it was collaborative, not just my thoughts. But yeah, education definitely is one of them. I think there's a lot of fear of people who maybe they work remotely now because of the pandemic, or they always have, and they just are so afraid to pull their kids out of the traditional school system. I keep getting comments like, but doesn't my kid need to be in one place and have stability to have, be a well-functioning adult? And I tell them no. It depends on the kid, but as long as they have mom and dad, or at least one of them, loving parent who's there, and other people who love them, and part of it is people, your teachers or whatnot at school, but having a community, that's stability enough for most kids. Okay, so let's get into Sora's main educational philosophy. You mentioned you kind of took the best from a lot of private schools, maybe also from some self-directed learning centers, democratic, Montessori, I don't know. You let me know. You basically found like the interesting educational philosophies and curriculum types. So let's talk about the philosophy of Sora, and then go a little bit deeper into the curriculum and the main academic programs.
Absolutely. The philosophy of Sora is, or maybe for this audience, I'll compare it to the traditional school system and what it's not, because I think most of us are familiar with the school system that I just alluded to about. It's about content. Everything is about increasing familiarity with reading, writing, arithmetic, history, right? And that is the end all be all. We need to march kids through at the same pace for organizational purposes, right? It's like all the thing that we're all familiar with, right? Sora rejects that for a lot of reasons. One is that education should be an exercise where, like we were saying right before we started this recording, it should be an exercise where students figure out what is important and meaningful to them, why learning is worth doing in the first place, right? That is the fundamental goal of education, especially in a world in the 21st century where high quality content is everywhere. If schools think their main value is providing content, they're wrong, because the internet exists. Really what schools have become are their coercion machines, right? It's like creating the structure and saying, do this or else, right? That's what schools have become.
Yeah, it's setting up kids to be obedient, initially factory workers and now corporate workers.
Yeah, something like that. So anyway, I just want to compare it to what it's not. And so our conclusion to what education should be is, like I said, it's about convincing students what is important, beautiful, worthy of their time. And how you do that is, one, learning in the context of the real world. So all of our learning at Sora is interdisciplinary, which means except math and foreign language, I'll caveat it. But everything else is interdisciplinary at Sora, which means you're learning not in the context of chemistry class. You're not going to class and thinking, today I'm going to learn chemistry, whatever that means, right? Instead, our students opt into interdisciplinary challenges such as how to fix the oceans, or I don't know, the how to launch a rocket, right? These are some random chemistry examples based on their interests. And then through solving those problems, through those inquiries, they are being exposed to and mastering those pieces of content. So I mentioned another really important point of Sora in that example, which is the word choosing. So we have 400 plus different learning experiences that are started or that are an option every 6-week cycle. And so it's up to the students with their advisor, who's this trusted adult who they see every single day. It's kind of like the quarterback, the mentor, the boss, the manager, you could say, of their experience. They work with them to craft, okay, what are my academic needs? What are my interests, and how can we work together to curate a curriculum that is personally meaningful to me, gets me closer to my goals, to create that sense of buy-in, right? So what I say is the Sora method moving the traditional model that we just talked about. So I won't dive into too much about that. That traditional model, we have to control their bodies, to control their minds, and they do everything at the same time, or else I'm going to crush their dreams in front of them. That model does not translate online very well because you do not control their bodies, right? It's not, Zoom school didn't work because you don't control their bodies. I say it doesn't work anyway, because even if you control someone's body, you can't control their mind. That's a fallacy. However, the method of meaning making, working with students to craft a curriculum together, interdisciplinary learning, interest-based learning, right? That, because it's a persuasive model of education, not a coercive model of education, that actually does translate online very, very well.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. So I encourage everyone to Google the learning pyramid, because what you're talking about, project-based learning and discussion groups, they are much more effective for learning than what the least effective way to learning, which is listening to lectures, and then reading, which, you know, we keep telling everyone you should read, but you're not going to remember everything that you read. And the best way to learn is if you know you have to teach it to others. So I like how Sora has a lot of these methods kind of in the middle, and it's about interest-based project, real world problems, or creating something, inventing something, that within that, I'm guessing they're going to be learning a bit of chemistry or reading or math or, you know, what have you. So it is more effective against, you know,
it's not that the content isn't important. I don't mean to, sometimes I do come across that way. So I'll caveat and say, it's not that the content isn't important. It's that the traditional way of teaching content, it fails on two fronts. One, it doesn't motivate kids. So the vast majority of them don't authentically engage with it. And learning is all about how much deliberate practice you put into it, which is a function of how important you think it is, right? So it doesn't motivate kids. And then secondly, they don't know why they're learning it. I just stored this fact about stoichiometry in my head for chemistry, but I guess I understand the function, but why is it important? When am I ever going to use it, right? When should I use it? Those are all the things that an interdisciplinary project-based environment immediately answers out of necessity.
Yeah. Students will remember what they're interested in and what's useful for their lives, and understanding how this knowledge or skill or whatever has a real practical use in the real world. So how are you able to have 400 learning opportunities, or whatever you call it, at once? Because is there some asynchronous learning? Are there recorded things, or you know, is it all synchronous? Because that's a lot to offer live for all the students.
Yeah, we offer something like, I'll have to review the numbers, but something like 75 synchronous learning experiences every 6 weeks. So students have tons and tons of choice. And at Sora, we have this concept, not to get too deep into the weeds, but we have a concept called learning pace at Sora, which means I don't really care that you're going the same sequence as all your other peers. In fact, in most cases, it doesn't matter. That's an organizational tool schools have implemented, not something that has to exist. So if you are just on fire about learning this other thing you haven't learned yet, great, go for it. And as long as you're learning enough new stuff every 6 weeks, I don't really care what it is. So that's why students are offering these 75 things, 70, 75, whatever it is. And they say, oh, that one looks exciting, that one looks exciting, that one looks exciting. It all gets me what we call, our standards are called units and abilities. So as long as it gets me enough units and abilities, I'm home free. Right. And then as long as they keep learning enough new stuff, they will graduate on time. They will get the traditional transcript that everyone expects that's accredited by Cognia WASC and approved by the NCAA. So they still get a US private school transcript that translates very well to college, but they did it through this interest-based, non-coercive, much more enjoyable, practical method.
Okay. And can you give some examples of some of these synchronous learning experiences? Expeditions.
Totally. It's tons and tons of different things. So it's like, how can we create a Martian society that teaches physics and civics? And there are things like Sora versus Wild, which is how students can implement the science of survival. So learning about biology, how their body works, physics, simple machines. It's things like literature through video games. So students analyze the story of one of their favorite video games instead of forcing them to do. I mean, Moby Dick is fine to read if they want, but let's personalize a story you already care a lot about and analyze it. So it's just a ton of here's another one. ethics through Dungeons and Dragons. So why do we just have to talk about ethical frameworks and philosophy? Why can't we actually implement them through real world role playing, right? So there's no one answer. We have tons and tons and tons of different ways to demonstrate each unit and ability. So to learn each standard, it's all up to your students' interest, but that immediately, the lesson hook is there, right? These kids are bought in because to some level, not only is it interesting, but they chose to be there. That's totally different than an adult put this on my schedule and either I do it or they ruin my dreams, right?
Right. Interesting. Okay, so you have expeditions, activities, and independent study projects. So that's kind of the main activities, I guess, for your students. And let's talk about your approach to math. And you said foreign language, because you said those are a little bit different than the more project-based stuff.
So those are still project-based. Yes, we have problem sets but they're not interdisciplinary. So students aren't learning in the context of a real world inquiry that's not directly math. So it's not like the other stuff like Sora versus Wild, where you secretly learn through that biology and all the things we just mentioned. It is math class. You're still going to Algebra 1. You're still going to pre-calculus. However, our method is I actually just saw a news report that Georgia, California, and one other state are significantly overhauling their curriculum in this direction, which I think is I clearly knew about Sora and were inspired, but it's about helping students understand the tools of math, implementing it in projects as being just as important of a goal as content mastery, problem sets, etc. So it's this meaning-making curriculum. It's combined with project-based, combined with deliberate practice. And foreign languages, not at Sora is not all that different or special, frankly.
Okay, interesting. Can you briefly explain the 7 mindsets, or at least list them, and maybe people
all of them?
Well, okay, I'll list them because I looked at your website. You say growth mindset, and then these are terms maybe people can Google and learn more about, or look at your website. Meaning making, agency, curiosity, positive sum thinking, metacognition, and connection seeking. So, wow, that sounds really amazing. You don't have to describe them all, but why do you have these mindsets?
It's a wonderful question. We think the goal of education in the 21st century, like I said, content is everywhere. Any sufficiently motivated learner can teach themselves basically anything, especially in this AI era. Having this world-class tutor in my pocket has enhanced my learning even greater than it already was, having access to YouTube and every textbook ever on Amazon, right? So this is an era where anyone who's sufficiently motivated can become anything that they want. So what is the role of education? It's not just that we have all the books and the smart people like it was for the last 1,000 years. That was the value out of a school. The purpose of education instead, or rather the primary goal of education, should be to mold a student's mind in a way that will help them live a good life and thrive in the modern world. And those are the mindsets. So everything in your life is downstream of the phrase coming to mind is quality of consciousness, but the less fancy way of saying that is everything is filtered through your mind and how you interpret events and how, your worldview. And so those mindsets are our attempt, and we put them up front and center for parents to say, here is how we are trying to help co-parent your kid. So that's what education ultimately is. Here are our values. Here is what we hope the portrait of what your kid becomes when they graduate is, right? So very quickly, I can talk about some of those. Growth mindset is essential, and a lot of education claims to be focused on growth mindset, even traditional schools, which I think is laughable, because growth mindset is the belief that you can improve pretty much all of your faculties, everything about yourself, but namely your intelligence through hard work. It is just true. But a lot of students have the belief that either I'm smart, or a lot of people have the belief that I'm smart, or I'm not smart. I'm good at this, or I'm not good at this, which isn't true. So most schools, they pay lip service to this, but then they still have this one attempt, single speed. You get labeled as an ABC student, you get tracked into honors classes or otherwise. it's antithetical to a growth mindset, which believes you can always improve through iteration, and really have no cap to your ability. At Sora, being a mastery-based environment, that is in our DNA. If you failed the first time, if you got a low mastery level, you got a 1 out of 4 on this standard, like I said, we call them units and abilities, great, try again, because no grades at Sora are final until graduation.
Okay. Yeah,
I can talk about all of them, but that'll take forever. I'm happy to, though.
Yeah, no, again, I don't want to take just too much of your time, because I know you have a lot of this information on your website, which I'll list in the comments. But you mentioned you do have grades, or some people call them marks. But if the students don't do well, they have a chance to redo it, right? Or to improve. Yes.
Exactly. Okay. It's mastery based. So yes, you still have a grade, and it gets compiled into a certain score in physics and chemistry so that colleges and employers can understand it, because that's how the world works. But everything is able to be overwritten, redone, and is a process of iteration until you have the grade, the mark that you like.
Okay, awesome. And yeah, so I'm just reading some of the comments. Sade says, I live in Atlanta, yay. She wants to connect Georgia Tech. It's the college I'm looking at attending, or Clark. I don't know. She's looking into going into nursing. So this is a mom. Yeah, and Janelle asked about pricing tuition, which you mentioned. And then she's asking a question that I'm planning to ask you, that the kids have full choice about what they learn or partial, because you do have requirements to graduate, right? Because you're accredited. And so how does that work? Because I know that you've talked a bit about intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic is, what comes out of yourself. Extrinsic is maybe gold stars or grades, or, you have to do this to graduate. And, how do you balance that with also fulfilling these requirements for graduation? How do you, I know you give them a lot of choice, but what if they keep, I don't know, denying anything about math?
Yeah.
I mean, how are you going to graduate an artist, for example, who
Right.
is Sora, who's just allergic to math?
Yeah, well, that gets back to growth mindset. Anyone can learn math. It's like a foreign language, right? Anyone can also learn a foreign language. What was that?
What if they don't want to? Maybe they had trauma in grade school from a teacher.
Yeah.
This is one of my daughters who's very artistic. She's very anti-math. So
absolutely,
on her.
This is a very common thing, right? I'm not trying to downplay it as something that's not common. But I think there is a fallacy at the heart of a lot of progressive education, which is this overly romantic view that kids can choose whatever they want, and it's totally fine if they choose not to learn to read, or that's the extreme example, right? But we owe it to them to say, here are the things that will be really, really, really helpful for your future. And I think we owe it to them also to say, I'm going to treat you with respect and as a human, and tell you why I think it's important, and give you choice on how you're going to learn it. We have, like you said, the independent study projects as an option for all of our content. So if you don't like one of the synchronous activities, if you don't synchronous experiences, if you don't like the activities we have, if you don't like anything, you can always propose an independent study project to learn the same content, get a grade, etc. So it's about that negotiated curriculum. You still have to learn math, and I'm going to work my butt off to convince you that you should learn math. And then I'm going to meet you halfway and say, how do we want to learn math together? But at some point, yes, it's important you learn to read. It's important you learn about civics and government. It's important you learn math. And it would be a failure. Yeah, it would be a failure on my part if I didn't hold you that standard. So yes, we do still have standards. It's about meeting kids halfway in that bit of negotiation.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, it's what parents do. We got to negotiate with our kids. I guess even radical unschoolers will say, it's a good idea to brush your teeth once in a while.
Right.
Consequences are. So it's, yeah.
And if your 4-year-old says no, you probably should still make them, right? So I think the coercive top down, you do this because I said so all the time, but not only is that a bad parenting philosophy, but that's at the root of our traditional education system. Yes. And I think it's equally wrong in both cases.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, yeah. So Janelle's saying interesting. Thanks for the info. Yeah, because another participant in my course, I chatted with them on Monday. They knew I was going to interview you. They kind of asked a similar question, how can you fit an eclectic, education that pulls from many resources and doesn't want to be locked into someone else's entire curriculum? So again, it's a balance of self-directing your learning and doing some core things that you adults at Sora think are really beneficial to the student's life when they, depending on their goals, they may or may not want to go to university. And if they want to go to university, there are requirements, right?
But if they do have this resource, I'm really excited about, like you said, eclectic resources. That's amazing, because most of the effort of education is getting people to care about it. It's kind of like most of the effort of personal training or health is getting people to first accept and agree that it's good for them and willing to put forth the effort. So if somebody says, here's a resource I really want to use, we always try to default to yes. In some cases, not possible, but we really try.
Okay, good. Let's talk about a typical day in the life of a Sora student. They wake up in the morning and they look at their class schedule, I guess, see what's going on, and they log on and what do they do? What's their typical day or typical week?
It's very much like a 21st century remote worker. So yes, you wake up, you see what meetings you have that day. It's usually, like I said, probably 3 hours of synchronous time, and the rest of the time they are maybe they're attending clubs they chose, or just working on independent project work, or what have you. But I will call out that, much like many companies, there is a morning meeting that we call stand up, which is where they see their advisor, they see all their other housemates, which is like a little mechanism we have at Sora, your little community. You talk about your goals for the day, you talk about any help you need, you talk about, sometimes you play a little icebreaker game or whatever. And those are usually, students can choose depending on both their time zone and their preferences, but those are usually about 9:30 a.m.
Okay. And then they have certain projects that they work on their own time. Do you recommend that they work on they use certain apps? How do they work on their projects? Do you supply, because you have a lot of pre-recorded stuff you mentioned, how do they get access to everything?
Yeah, most of our expeditions have projects, and expeditions are, you meet 2 or 3 times a week. You are being, an expert is hosting this, you're being walked through the process of creating a project, answering the question, etc. So that's very much a guided experience. If materials are needed, like we've done dissections before, we've done, launching rockets, we've done all this stuff. Generally, we ship it to you. Sometimes it's your responsibility. If the student's doing ISP work, which is the independent study project, they proposed it. It's a crazy idea, one of one. They're either working on it themselves or with a few friends. They gotta find the materials for that as well. So it really depends.
Okay. And how involved do the parents need to be?
Great question. So Sora is much more like a private school, where you as a parent need to celebrate education, say it's important, care about it, all the things that we all know. But I'll mention it anyway. Those things you still have to do, but much like a private school, Sora is designed to be an end-to-end experience. You have an advisor, you have a whole academic support team. They will let you know whether something like your student didn't attend, they're not doing well, you get narrative feedback on their courses. Everything is handled for you like a private school. However, if you are excited about engaging in your kids' education, we give you, you have a full dashboard to see what they're learning, their deliverables, and then you can, bring it up at the dinner table kind of thing, but that is by no means required. I will say, being a remote school, you need to support us in, like, if your kid's not showing up, you need to help them show up, right? Some stuff like that, I guess, like driving them to school.
Right. Yeah. And then sometimes there's tech glitches or problems, or the computer dies, internet's
Most
not
kids
good.
can usually figure that out with our help. They're pretty smart.
Good. But if the internet goes down in your Airbnb when you're traveling.
That's true. Yeah.
Tell me about a little bit more about the adults who work or teach or facilitate at Sora. You mentioned advisors, you mentioned experts, you have different people, right?
Yep. So every family has their advisor, and this is someone who works with you know, nothing close to the ratio of most schools. It's like a 1 to 20-ish ratio. They know you, they know your family, they know your student, they know their goals, their challenges, right? It's somebody that they see quite literally every day in this stand-up. They meet with them one-on-one every couple of weeks to do deep dives. Like, this is somebody who knows your kid, and they are helping you every step of the way, answering your questions, helping them. Oh, I see you really thrived in this expedition. I challenge you to create an independent study project to take this further, right? They're that force in the student's life, really important. And then all of the learning experiences are taught or facilitated by a faculty member that we call an expert. So these are people, teachers, they're teachers. We use fancy words for everything, but they are really the top 1% of teachers in the US, but also now internationally. For the first time this year, we've had something like 4,000 applications to teach at Sora. So we have a less than 1% acceptance rate. That's why I say it's literally 1%. These are just spectacular people who, because of Sora's interdisciplinary approach, they are co-creating the curriculum, just like students are saying, here's what my interests are. The faculty are saying that too. So you can really feel their passion bringing it to these learning experiences, and the students can feel it.
That is amazing. Okay, great. I just want to check to see if people have, oh yeah, so Janelle is saying your tuition seems a bit pricey for large families, because I know she has 4 kids. And one family will be over 48,000. I guess it's typical for US private schools. Still, it's remote. That's a lot of money. Yeah, Janelle, I've seen a lot of online schools in this ballpark, or even more. So I don't know, Garrett, I don't know if you offer family discounts, multiple child discounts.
We offer financial aid. That's been an important thing since the beginning of our organization's mission. So 47% of our families are on some sort of financial aid. As low as $3,600 per student. So I encourage families, if you're intrigued by Sora, to still check us out, talk to our admissions team, and maybe it will be less expensive than you expect. But yes, it costs a good amount of money to run a proper progressive private school.
Yeah, I agree. I was at a program that didn't charge very much, and now, you know, financially it's tough for them. Okay, so let's talk about applying to Sora and admissions. Do you have certain requirements? Because I did have somebody reach out to me saying, oh, I applied to Sora, my child did. We didn't get in. So they were kind of upset about it, but and they wanted to know what other options were out there. So let's talk about how to apply. What do you guys look for? And what's that whole process like?
Yeah, so the first step is reaching out to our admissions team or starting your application. And the application includes academic records. So even if you're a homeschooler, totally okay. We have a lot of those. We just want to know what you've learned over the last 2 years to make sure that we are only 6 or 11-year-olds through 18-year-olds roughly. So we can't cover the whole universe of things that students need to learn. So we just want to make sure that your academic background sets your child up to be successful at Sora. It also includes 2 either teacher or mentor, the word escapes me, recommendations, evaluations we call it, which is basically, here are the unique needs. Here's how Sora works. Here's the type of student that thrives at Sora, and I can talk more about that. How do you think, honestly, they would rate across these things? And then we have a student interview where we talk to the student about why they care about Sora, you know, what their goals are, academically and otherwise, to make sure that we are set up to support them as well. So really, it's about, we want to make sure education, much like any other pursuit in personal development, it's all about believing that it's important, believing that the community I'm in matters and is therefore worth my effort. So that's why we go through this process, to really cultivate our community.
Okay, awesome. And do you have any graduates yet? Because you've been around for what, 4+ years?
We do, yeah. Every year it's growing, which is exciting. Not only in, you know, but also the scale of our graduation ceremonies. We started, as you know, with just 7 kids, so that was a very small graduating class, and I think this year we have something like 40 or 50. So it's an exciting growth, and overall to date, we've probably had 35 or 40. So super exciting. And they are getting into their top choice colleges. They're getting scholarships. So we're very excited to see Sora's unique program is translating well. And our accreditation, private school accreditation, does seem to be holding a good amount of weight.
That's awesome. Yeah, because I was wondering what path they're taking. Are all of them attending or applying to university? Are any of them starting a business or doing internships or non-traditional paths?
Absolutely. We've had students get high-paying entry-level jobs right out of high school, because even though it required a college degree on the website, their portfolio at Sora was strong enough to be a college equivalent. We've had that happen. We have students taking gap years, traveling the world, doing their own world schooling thing while studying remotely. The default is certainly still at least applying to college, but we have students going through all sorts of paths.
And do you help them with college prep? Do you help them study for the SATs? Is that the typical thing they do, or skip that?
Well, studying for the SATs, we don't have any sort of SAT boot camps, mostly because that's also kind of going out of style. But we have a full college advising program that starts in their beginning of their junior year. So it's a full ramp up to identify fit. What's the next step? What are your values? What are you looking for? Family circumstances, et cetera. Then creating a game plan to make sure they're prepared to both get in and then succeed once they're there.
Okay, great. And so how would you feel that Sora is different from other online schools? So I'm sure you've done a competitive analysis and looked at the ones that have been around for a while. Maybe they were the box curriculum, homeschool kind of stuff that just slap their stuff online, and others are a bit more innovative like yours. Maybe we compare you to the more innovative ones.
Sure. There are really, when we started, we were the first school that said, we're going to bring a world-class progressive private school style education online, because really the tools you need to do that, the collaboration tools, even like what we're using right now to talk to each other, they're fairly new. Before, there was not good enough infrastructure to do it really well. That's also why the rise of remote work is really a now thing. So we're going for a no compromises private school experience, just like someone in in a private school experience.
Right.
No one was doing that when we started. And I think because Sora is probably the biggest program of the ones that are doing it now, no school offers our level of options in the curriculum, our experience, and also the size of the community. So students being able to interact with students from all across the country, all across the world, having a presence in your city, perhaps, hopefully even likely if you're in a medium or large city. So I think that all makes Sora quite special. Plus, we're just, we do other things, like we have our own software, we have our own, a lot of our own tools to enable this type of education at the price point that we're able to do. Awesome.
How many students do you have now, 4 or 5 years in?
That is our enrollment deadline now, so we will know soon, but our student body is growing something like 3 to 4x year over year. So we're really excited. Hundreds of new kids coming every year. It's an exciting time.
How many are you expecting for this coming school year?
We will see. Hundreds. I'll say that.
Okay. How many did you have last year?
It's a secret.
Oh, come on. A few.
We don't generally say, but because parents are used to a paradigm where big school is less personal. That's just not how it works at Sora, right? So
no, because the bigger the school gets, the more offerings you have, and the
precisely
more efficient you can be, and the more other kids. And I haven't even asked you about the kids connecting and socializing with each other online. I'm guessing that happens. So I think it's a good thing when they get bigger.
Okay, I'll tell you then. We'll have something like 300 new students this year, and that is going to bring our student body probably close to 400 this year. So we had about 140 last year, and then 20
so you really graduated. Yeah, and I know you guys raised some money, more money from whatever angel VC people. That's good. It means it works. It's working, right? Wonderful. Okay, so last question, or one of my last questions, is why would a world schooling child be a good fit for Sora and vice versa?
Yeah, Sora is an untethered school, just like the value system a lot of you have. I understand it's a little difficult for you all who love traveling to Europe and Asia and those other continents and time zones right now. But for a certain type of family who mostly stays in the Americas, which is actually a decent percentage of our parents, this enables a completely different lifestyle. And it's not just that you have to have boxed curriculum, you have to deal with the education element of world schooling or of being a nomadic family. It's no, you have a world-class private school that moves with you. So it's a completely different paradigm. It's a game changer for many, but like I said, I know every family is different. So if you're intrigued by Sora, but don't know if it'll work with your own, the idiosyncrasies of your life, contact our admissions team. They are trained to walk through the different scenarios and let you know if Sora would or would not be a good fit.
Awesome. And, I do know some families that did a synchronous US based school that were in Europe. It was a challenge, but it was kind of nice because they had the daytime free to go skiing and to do fun stuff. And then in the evening, and I forget what time they started, mom had a marketing job with a US company, and then their kid was in that online school. So in the evening, it was when they kind of did their work.
I love that. I personally love when I'm working remote from Europe because it's the same thing. It's like I can do anything until 2 or 3 p.m. and then I work until dinner, and it's great for me, but I understand it's not everyone's life.
Yeah, and sometimes they would miss group dinners with other world schooling families or whatnot. Okay, so my last question is, if you ever have kids of your own someday, would you want to be a world schooling family?
Certainly. And they'll be enrolled in Sora, no doubt. I'm way too nomadic to be married to one school for any number of years. I got to bounce around.
But you don't accept kids until they're 9, 10, 11 years old. So what online school do you recommend for younger kids, if at all?
I think a school in the future. I think I would probably try to do some combination of homeschooling and there's like I'm hoping companies like Higher Ground, the Montessori company, continues to grow because they are creating these pop in, pop out membership Montessori programs around the world, or no matter where you go, or Boundless Life. I really hope these sort of places continue to grow and have presence in all the major cities around the world. But until then, I don't know. I think elementary education online education has a little way to go, and that's why Sora doesn't do it until middle school.
I agree. Great. So I know that you're active on Twitter, so I'm going to put your Twitter info if people want to follow you there and ask you a question, because you're not in our Facebook group, and maybe your LinkedIn, and then obviously the website for Sora. I will put those in the chat. And so, yeah, if anyone has questions for Garrett, just track him down on Twitter or go to their website or say hello to him on LinkedIn. So awesome, Garrett. Thank you so much. I think there's pros and cons for a lot of people with online schools that live our lifestyle. But what you're offering is fantastic. And if people can figure out the schedule, the time zone and whatnot, and the tuition, I think it's a really great fit.
Thank you so much. It was a great conversation. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Okay, see you later. Bye.
Hey, thanks for watching. I'm Lizz Quain. My twins and I have been traveling and world schooling for about 7 years, and I'm happy to share our experiences. Make sure to check out all the other videos on my channel. I have a playlist of interviews of fascinating world school families and service providers who share lots of info and wisdom about world schooling, traveling, and the digital nomad family lifestyle. If you're new to world schooling or have recently launched and are struggling because you're kind of winging it, if you need some help, I do have a super comprehensive 12-week program on how to world school and travel extensively as a family. I share lots of info on travel logistics, where to go, how to find community, how to immerse yourself into local cultures, and the variety of ways to educate your kids while traveling above and beyond homeschooling them yourself, and much, much more. Make sure to watch my free 2-hour masterclass on how to become a world schooling trailblazing family. That is a great way to learn how to get started. I'll include a link in the description with more info. Thanks and happy trails.